Boogeyman living in a scary house, telling the scaries with a stitched up mouth. Underneath the moonlight, quiet as a mouse. Boogeyman lurking in the shadow, no doubt. Boogeyman, Boogeyman, what do you fear? Tell us a scary that'll make us cheer. Boogeyman, give us some scary dreams. Creature in the closet, eerie screams. Here he comes, here he comes. Tonight, The Scary Show presents 6 remastered Tales of the Boogeyman. Written by The Panic Within, T-Stash, Timothy Duran, and The Scary Show, featuring the voice talents of Maya Michelle, Josie Kitty, Creepy Clown Girl, The Panic Within, T-Stash, Timothy Duran, and The Scary Show. And now, on with the show.
Let me tell you about the time I saw 𝗦𝘂𝗯𝗀𝗮𝗯𝗲. At first, I could not believe my eyes. There was no way that this was real, right? At first glance, he almost seemed like a what? A huge dark shadow looming in the darkness, blending in with the shadows that already fell on the brick alleyway wall. The same darkness as the shadows surrounding the large dumpster, tucked away in the corner at the end. That was until I noticed the bright red eyes coming from the shadow, glowing in the darkness surrounding it, not hidden by the shadows at all. What on earth? I muttered to myself, almost positive it was a trick of the light, until it moved, closing the distance between us with every slinking step. It opened its mouth to speak, I think, or so I assumed. I was horrified when instead, thousands of wiggly and disgusting bugs fell out. Large roaches, the hissing kind, worms, beetles, and many, many more, along with more shadow that fell out looking a lot like dirt. The creature let out a long, deep, and angry moan. From what slowly showed as decaying lips. It slowly and painfully twisted into a human form in front of my eyes, only for me to then have to watch as it decayed in front of me, flesh falling to the ground to expose muscle, tendons, and eventually bones, only to end in a mushy shadow heap on the ground. Absolutely horrified, I took one last glance at the remaining bugs scattering around my feet before taking off running at full speed towards my house, not looking back. I slammed the door and locked it behind me. I took a shower to get the edge off as, again, I was horrified, then laid down on my bed. Once I finally calmed down, I closed my eyes, waiting for sweet sleep to take over, when I heard the same long, deep, and angry moan from the corner of my room in the heavy shadows. Terrified, I froze.
I work independently as an investigator of true stories, mostly hunting any inkling of truth of what goes bump in the night. I've lost count of the numerous phone calls and emails of could-be-true experiences and sights. Hardly any of them caught my attention. The ones I've pursued in the past often have a detail or two that stand out from the majority sent to me. My last job is one of these submissions. Let me tell you about the time I saw I've been in contact with someone who's claimed to have first-hand encountered I've talked with them, emailing back and forth, discussing vague details of what they saw, or claimed to have seen. I was unconvinced of anything he told me, yet he was persistent. After a while, I finally relented and gave him my personal cell number as to discuss his experience. He called almost immediately. The sincerity and fear in his voice as he told me of what he had witnessed, it pushed me to believe the validity of his claims. An hour later, I set up a meeting with him. I made sure to pack up a few things with me, a recorder for the conversation in case I missed any details, and my laptop to record visually. 2 days, 1 flight, and a hotel stay later, I found myself walking into a restaurant around noon. I looked around, the dim lights making it difficult to see the faces of customers. My eyes noticed a nervous-looking man in the corner booth sitting alone. I approached him. Gerald. His head snapped towards me, outstretching his hand weakly.
Yes, that's me. Mr. White, please, sit.
I sat in the booth across from him. Perfect. Now, if you'd like to discuss, he cut me off.
No, please. I'd rather get this over and done with. I already feel I shouldn't be doing this.
I eyed him, cautiously. All right then. Let me turn on my recorder, and we can begin. I clicked the record button, and set it on the table. May 5th, 2023. I'm sitting with Gerald, no last name given, as he tells me of his first-hand experience with the otherworldly. If you would.
Yes, I guess I'll start. It's been an ongoing thing in my life. I honestly thought it was just a childish fear, until more recently. Let me start at the beginning. When I was a boy, every night I had the same dream. In this dream, I was lying in my bed, in my room, exactly as it was before falling asleep. I remember the closet door opening, and out of it came this bulbous creature. It was covered in something slimy, like mucus. It walked towards me, stopping at the foot of my bed. It was facing me, just staring. After a few seconds, I saw it reach towards me and take something out of me. It greedily gobbled it up, continuing to take more and more. After it had had its fill, it left the way it came. The strange thing was, I never woke up from these dreams. I never slept well because of it. My parents thought it was because I watched too much TV right before bed. I really wish that were true.
It was at this time the waiter came by and asked us if we were ready to order. Gerald didn't ask for anything. I requested some water for us to keep hydrated. Gerald grabbed the cup when it arrived and guzzled the water. He cleared his throat and continued.
Thank you. So, I honestly thought they were dreams. After a while, we moved out of that house, and the next house, and the one after that. I had never lived in a room with a closet in all of those years after leaving. A couple months ago, I moved into my own apartment. My room had a closet with a heavy wood door. I thought to myself, it's been a long time since I've had one of these. After a week of living there, I woke to a strange sound. I convinced myself it was the old wood settling. Then the sound came again, waking me fully this time. My eyes darted around the room looking for any sign of the source. The third time I heard it, it sounded like something was scratching on wood. It sounded like it was coming from my closet. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I adjusted myself on my back so I could see the closet fully. Another scratch. I was trying to convince myself that it was being caused by rats or mice. My body felt cold, and I saw the doorknob start to rattle and turn. I sat there frozen, praying that it would stop. The doorknob turned fully, and the closet began to open. There, in the doorway, stood the creature I had thought was only a childhood nightmare. Its eyes, they were glowing in the dark. It had a wide grin as it saw me. Its fingers had long claws. 2 small horns were on its head, and everything was covered in that mucus. The rancid stench of it hit me. I couldn't bear to smell it. It walked towards me. I couldn't do anything except watch. It came to the foot of my bed and cocked its head to the side. Second later, it reached its long hands towards me. I felt the claws as they reached towards me and into me, but it never hurt. I saw it grab something from me repeatedly and devour it. Each time I felt my energy get weaker. I began to lose consciousness. Before I knew it, I passed out. Every night for the last 2 months, that thing has been there in my room. I have been losing so much sleep. I'm not sure if I can keep this up.
I looked towards the table, taking all of this in, trying to understand what he told me. I felt I had to tread carefully with my response. That's... wow. I'm not sure how to respond. From what you've told me, and the details, I don't doubt what you've said, but it feels so unexplainable.
You believe me though, right?
He looked into me, fear and desperation in his eyes. If you would like my honest opinion, I can't say for certain if I do or don't. That doesn't mean what you've told me can't be true. There's much I need to understand about it first. I saw some relief in his face.
Oh, okay. That's good, I guess. I'm just glad you haven't called me crazy.
I'm no psychiatrist. I wouldn't call you or anyone crazy or mental one bit. So, Gerald, this is the entirety of your encounters with this being, yes? He nodded his head.
Yeah, I'm not sure what sharing this is going to do, but it feels good to get it off my chest, to be honest. Thank you. Truly. Thank you for believing me, even if you don't right now.
I shook his hand and smiled. Of course. I will be in town until tomorrow evening for my flight home. If you have any other details, please reach out. He smiled, nodded his head, and left. I got up and left a tip on the table, and left the restaurant, returning to my hotel room. The next few hours were spent writing down everything I had recorded of our conversation. Before I knew it, the night grew late, and I caught myself yawning every few minutes. I saved my progress, closed the laptop, and made my way to bed. On the cusp of drifting into sleep, I heard a muffled sound. I lifted my head, looked around, saw nothing, and returned to my attempt at sleep. Again, I heard a sound, louder than the last, scratching on wood. I whispered to myself, "You've got to be fucking kidding me." Another scratch followed. I sat up in bed and turned to face the closet. The doorknob rattled and slowly turned. It cracked open. A horrid stench crinkled my nose as I stared at the door. 2 red orbs gazed at me from the darkness. Before the closet door opened any further, I bolted out of my bed and out of the hotel room. That night I spent on the sofa of the hotel lobby. When day came, I carefully returned to my room, finding nothing strange other than the closet door opened a crack still. I quickly collected my items, checked out of the hotel, and spent the rest of the day at the airport. I boarded my flight and returned home. Paranoid and terrified from my experience there, I spend my nights sleeping on my couch in the living room. On occasion, I email Gerald. He seems to be doing his best with everything happening. I've kept my experience of a secret from him. With each job I take, I've learned to be more cautious with pursuing the things that go bump in the night. I still chase them, but not as recklessly as I used to be. I still look forward to pursuing these things, and I expect to read about a new experience from my fans every now and then.
As the rain cascaded down, drumming against the window pane, Emily found herself unable to sleep. A soft whimper escaped her lips, and she clutched her blanket tightly, her eyes fixated on the gloomy night beyond her window. Then, through the misty glass, she saw it. A shadowy figure standing outside, just beyond the reach of the porch light. 𝗺cie𝗿𝗲𝗯𝗲 had come. Fear gripped Emily's heart, and she froze, unable to tear her eyes away. But as the rain soaked the figure's tattered coat, Emily noticed something unexpected. A tremor, a vulnerability that mirrored her own. Suddenly, 𝗺cie𝗿𝗲𝗯𝗲 turned towards her, their eyes meeting through the barrier of glass. In that instant, a connection formed, a recognition of shared fears and loneliness. 𝗺cie𝗿𝗲𝗯𝗲's posture softened, its menacing aura dissipating. It was as if they too sought solace from the storm, seeking a glimmer of understanding. Emily's fear transformed into empathy, and with a small, tentative smile, she mouthed the words,
"You're not alone."
𝗺cie𝗿𝗲𝗯𝗲 seemed to nod in gratitude, their stoic face softening momentarily. And then, as if guided by an unspoken bond, 𝗺cie𝗿𝗲𝗯𝗲 stepped back, slowly fading into the rainy night. The rain continued to fall, but Emily felt a newfound sense of peace and compassion. From that moment forward, Emily realized that 𝗺cie𝗿𝗲𝗯𝗲 wasn't merely a harbinger of terror, but a reminder that even in the darkest corners, there is room for connection and understanding. And as she drifted off to sleep, the sound of rain became a lullaby, carrying her dreams of empathy and the transformative power of kindness.
My situation is almost comical. My family have always told me to avoid 𝗺𝘂𝗯𝗃 because of reason X, Y, and Z. I was made to believe that this monster would get me if I didn't behave and do as they told. It would have made more sense for me to listen until I got old enough to understand why they warned me about him. While we call him 𝗦𝘂𝗯𝗀𝗯𝗲, most call him the Boogeyman. You might think of him as some fictional character made to make disobedient children do as they're told, or even try to explain him away as some cold-blooded killer. If only it was that easy to explain. I'll do my best to explain how I met and survived meeting the Boogeyman. It started out a few years back when my old friend Francisco laid a curse on me. He saw me going on to date this woman of his dreams as the ultimate indignation on his character and our friendship. To him, me pursuing Natalia was more than inconsiderate. It was betrayal. And thus, he laid a curse on me, proclaiming the night that I planned to propose to Natalia that I was willfully stealing her away from him, and that my lust, not love, would undo me. You are no hermano of mine, Omar. You care for no one but yourself and your lust. It was never enough that women threw themselves at you. You had to go for the one, the only woman I ever loved. I tried to reason with him, but his mind and lips were set. Francisco, I will hear none of it, Omar. I offer you everything you could dream of and more. Cars, money, other women. But you choose her? No. We are finished. My hands will not cleanse you of your lust. You must contend with your actions by any means. And with that, he left. He left me and Natalia along with his date. He had been dating Natalia's friend Maribel for 2 years now, with the intent of getting closer to Natalia to return her back to him, despite them never properly being a couple in the first place. Natalia went on a date with him once and was immediately disinterested, but that never stopped his obsession. Francisco was a man fueled by his gluttony above all else. Francisco came from a family of wealth. His grandfather controlled much of the wealth in Mexico through his money in telecommunications and electronics. He came from a family of millionaires and billionaires, while he himself only tended to leech from their wealth and status, while I spent my time trying to be a doctor. He found himself engaging in every way of extravagance and that one could think of. He would pay for expensive trips, things we would never need or use, and nights with escorts that he would later try to forget and wipe evidence of from his bank statements. What I never could shake from my experience with him growing up was how he always was seemingly jealous of me. He seemed to want my life more than his own. I come from a modest home, and my parents both worked under his family in one way or another. His family took great care of mine, and we became friends as a result of us being so close. However, we grew apart as we got older, and he wanted to keep acting like a child, while I was more focused on becoming a doctor and healing those less fortunate than us both. It always seemed like Francisco had no care for anything that did not catch his fancy. It either entertained and pleased him, or it didn't exist. And if he grew disinterested in it, he left it abandoned. This was the case for an old house he had left out in the old ranchitos of northern Mexico. He sent me a message 2 months after the event, trying to apologize for his actions, and wanted to meet at the old villa we used to stay at on vacation in Zacatecas. I was reluctant to go, but my mother thought it would be best to try and heal my friendship with him. So, with much hesitation, I made the trip there. Natalia warned me about going there, but I knew that my mother and his family would distance themselves from me if I didn't try. I arrived a few hours before nightfall, just with enough time to catch Francisco before he had become fully drunk. He had just made 2 margaritas and was holding one for me at the door to the villa. He greeted me with one near his lip and another in his hand, stretched out to greet me and provide me with the gateway into his intoxicated world. "Ah, Omar, I was beginning to think you wouldn't show up." I tried to shrug off his doubts. It seemed like he wouldn't really care if I showed up or not. As we both got older, Francisco was rarely sober, so this was expected. What I should have also expected was for something to be wrong with my drink. As a sign of goodwill, I took the drink from his hand. I would have come here sooner, but they had me working long hours further south near Tabasco. I'm assuming this is for me? Omar laughed. But of course, I wouldn't want to be drunk alone. He gestured for me to follow him to the pool. Come, let's drink to a new life near the water, while we clear the air. I made my way to the surface of the pool and began to drink. Immediately I noticed a hint of cinnamon on the back end of my throat and my nose as I continued to sip. Whoever made this drink knew to hide the smell and taste of cinnamon well. The drink was poisoned and was set with a sedative made for me to pass out. I almost immediately began to fade out and lose consciousness. I felt woozy as Omar slapped his hand across my back with laughter, sending me crashing face first into the pool. Within seconds, I blacked out. I woke up wet inside a dark room and immediately found myself coughing. Whoever did this planned for me to stay at this villa and not leave alive. I could hear Francisco's voice as he was talking to what seemed to be a woman and a man. The woman's voice sounded like the old housekeeper for the villa, while the man's voice sounded barely human. Francisco stumbled in, choking. You know, I couldn't seem to pull you out of that water myself. But my friend pulled you out just fine. He told me he'd rather you be awake and aware of the brutal death he's going to give you. Francisco began to grow more agitated. You know, Natalia always seemed to care more for you than me. I don't know what more a woman could want than money, power, and fame. I had it all, Omar, but I still wanted her. I only wanted her above all else. He began to stomp as he threw his glass onto the stone floor. And you took her from me! That bitch was supposed to be mine, not yours! He picked up some of the broken glass and started to carve cuts into my side. You feel that, Omar? That burning sensation from me cutting into you as you cut into me? That's much nicer than what my friend is going to do to you. I cried out as he drove the glass deeper into my skin. What, friend? What are you doing? Why are you doing this to me? What are you going to do? He dropped the glass in frustration. No, this is no fun. I want to hear your screams as he tears into your flesh as you tore Natalia from my arms. I want him to violate you worse than you did me. He began to call out to the boogeyman. Senor Cucuy! He's all yours. A shadow figure with inhuman arms and a pale white face resembling porcelain showed itself in the doorway as Francisco stumbled his way out. See you in hell, cabron! With that, Francisco left the room and the boogeyman slowly crept towards me, clicking as it made its way closer. He began to speak as he came within a half meter of me.
I see. A specimen that has been corrupted by lust. You will make for a tasty treat.
The boogeyman began to reach its hand down towards my crotch, creeping its sharp nails across my skin, smelling my body as its hands skinned and clawed on its way down.
Are you ready to beg for your death, Omar?
I winced as he drew his hand further and further down until finally it stopped at my waist.
Something is peculiar. You do not smell the rust. You are not sinful enough for me to take your life.
That's when it hit me. Francisco lied to the boogeyman to try and get it to kill me and leave no trace. I think we were lied to. We were both lied to. The boogeyman quickly turned its head around to look towards the floor. Francisco had been listening in the entire time and could be heard stumbling and cursing as he tried to run. With near inhuman speed, the boogeyman rushed out to the room in pursuit of Francisco. I found myself able to move once the creature was no longer on top of me. It chased Francisco down in no time. I tried to peer over, but they were both beyond my view. I could hear Francisco cry out for help, as I felt every bone in my body screaming to run. I heard the Boogeyman's voice now.
You lied to me. No one lies to me. You lied about Ownmart being consumed by lust to hide your own gluttony, and for that, you must be punished.
I couldn't see what happened, but I could hear Francisco's screams that his organs were torn apart, followed by his bones. I ran as quickly as I could back to my car as I heard the sound of bones breaking and him screaming for his life, his mother, and his father. I drove off back the way I came and never looked back. I heard from an old family member that the housekeeper was put into a hospital, likely because no one believed her story and assumed she was traumatized by someone killing Francisco. His family wanted to blame me, but the housekeeper's story quickly made them rule me out, as it made no sense for me to be able to do on my own. According to the housekeeper, Francisco was immediately castrated upon the attack beginning, followed by the creature breaking each of his limbs one by one with inhuman strength. Finally, from behind a wall, the housekeeper watched in horror as the creature unhinged its mouth and raked Francisco's dying body inside of it, finishing the job by licking the walls and floor clean of his blood and organs. I tried to forget about Francisco, but I could never seem to forget that night, even on the wedding day that I had with Natalia. One thing is for certain, when I have my kids in the future, I will warn them to always try to be true, but most of all, never lie to 𝗪𝗂𝗂𝗰𝗄𝗯𝗄.
He wasn't a bad kid, just, strange. I remember him sitting by himself in the corner of the classroom, his mouth moving, but no sound coming out.
Yeah, I used to sit across from him in 5th period humanities class. He never talked to anyone. He liked to sit way in the back corner of the class, away from the light, in the dark.
I remember he loved to draw. I remember he loved to draw.
Silence followed the heavy thud made by the chainsaw placed upon the hardware store's counter. An awkward stare down, and a shift in the wind's direction later. The clerk behind the counter swallowed and answered,
I'm sure it can, but it ain't meant to.
The question: does it cut through bones? You have heard people say that artists are tortured souls. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that some tormented souls are artists. Either way, there seems to be a remarkably apparent link between artists and various forms of traumatic stress. Art, in a multitude of mediums, can be readily explored as an outlet for such stress. It is readily available as a coping tool, even to those who may not feel that they have any artistic skill whatsoever. For creatives, the effects of trauma can often be longer lasting and more intense due to their inclination to keep thinking on it. Something I have often thought about over the years is the experience I had watching my first horror movie in a theater. You may have heard that the devil wears ruby-colored pajamas. You've probably seen artist depictions of the devil wielding a three-pronged pitchfork, ready to jab some jabroni in the ass cheeks. While I cannot speak on what the devil does or does not wear to bed, my childhood self could tell you with absolute certainty that the devil did not use a three-pronged pitchfork. No. The devil owns a chainsaw. I was a child, younger than 10 for certain. My legal guardian took me to a movie theater somewhere in San Francisco's Mission District to see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Can I have some Reese's Pieces?
What started out as a fun theater visit,
Thank you.
just like the one I was previously taken on to see the movie Bambi for the first time, would soon prove to be far from it. I remember the coercive smell of hot buttered popcorn, sold in striped cartons, a scent that I still to this day associate with going to the movies. In my covetous little hands, however, I held the treat that I could never seem to get enough of after seeing the movie E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Reese's Pieces. The carpet of the theater lobby was carmine, with grand patterns sewn into it, seemingly spanning the length of the building's interior in all directions. The cushioned chairs inside the theater were a dusty maroon, with spring-loaded seats that flipped up when you stood. My legal guardian led me by one hand as I held my Reese's Pieces in the other to where we found our seats, somewhere in the aisle, in the middle. I hopped up onto my seat, my legs dangling above the sticky theater floor below. I would have been jabbering on endlessly to deaf ears about the Smurfs or some other Saturday morning cartoon that I watched religiously back then, whilst filling my face with the candy-coated, peanut buttery goodness. And before long, the lights dimmed, the coming attractions played, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre began. The next thing I remember is coming to my senses outside of the movie theater, crying hysterically, shaking, traumatized, scarred. It would be years before I forgave my legal guardians for that. Years before I could sleep through the night without being plagued by nightmares. I would be as a man afflicted until the day I bought my first chainsaw. Tonight's Scary was written by Scary. If you enjoy the stories you find here, hit the like button. Think of it like applause at the end of a show. Please subscribe and click the top bell for all notifications so that you never miss an episode. And if you wouldn't mind, share this video so that others can discover The Scary Show. Questions, comments, suggestions? Let me know down below. The Scary Show always answers the fans, unless YouTube hides your comments from me.